Okay, Hare Krishna. I hope that changed the volume setting. Please give me some input and let me know if that was good. I just readjusted things on the um, screen here. Yay, okay, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. I'm learning how to do this as we go step by step. The more times that I end up working on this on my own. Good, good. Karuna Shakti, Sharni are very happy with the volume. Great. So, once again, Hare Krishna, and welcome to another evening in the lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. I'm your host, Chaturatma Das. Okay. I've been contemplating a bit over the last few days as many of us, I'm sure, that are out there, many of you that are out there listening, I'm sure that you find yourselves in an environment, perhaps working in the secular world or attending college or something of that nature. And we mix with those that may not have the same goals, to put it mildly, that we do in our lives. And this presents itself sometimes with different qualities that we come across in people. One of the, just in a regular workplace, you encounter all types of circumstances and details. So it got me to thinking, I had a scenario like that in my own work this week. So it got me to thinking, what about the qualities that we strive to develop as Vaishnavas? And my wife was reading me something at dinner one evening that she had come across, and it caused me to think about the phrase that's very common with us, para dukkha dukhi. Now, para dukkha dukhi, we can understand that the phrase comes from the quality of compassion, from developing a mood of compassion for other living entities. Not so much toward other living entities, because that kind of denotes ourselves being superior, although we may be in a higher realm of consciousness, but encompassing other living entities, being concerned about them, compassion. This para dukkha dukhi is, describes how a devotee feels pain, actually discomfort, when they see the suffering of others. And that suffering may even be suffering that they are not aware they're experiencing. Devotee becomes unhappy to know that the others are not enjoying the bliss of spiritual realization. So how do we develop these qualities? What is our standard of knowing what to develop? And in the Madhya Lila, I believe it's chapter 22, verses 78 to 80, as a matter of fact. I was looking at it earlier today. The 26 qualities of a devotee are given, and these are discussed in the conversation between Lord Chaitanya and I can't remember right off the top of my head if it's Rupa Goswami or Sanatana Goswami. Probably with both of them. But the point is that compassion is one of these qualities, and it's not mundane compassion that someone should just be relieved of their suffering, but that they should get something that will benefit them. Prabhupada gives the example that if there's an old type of punishment where you would put someone in a seat, and then they would be attached to, the seat is attached to a pole, and they would be dumped underwater. This was in early times in some medieval parts of of Europe, and then some earlier parts in the development of America. This was a punishment that was used in the Puritan societies. And they would put this person like this in underwater, and then when you would come up for air, you think, oh God, finally I've got some air. But it wasn't so much that being strapped to that chair and being up in the air was pleasure, was satisfying, but it was simply a lack of suffering. So under the heading of para dukkha dukhi, it's not so much that we only want to see that ourselves as well as others in the world are free from suffering, but that they get something beneficial, something that will prove to be helpful to them. And this is why the devotees of the Lord, we will see, have an intense desire to assist the living entities in freeing themselves from that. It's actually, as it's described, it's a very advanced state, a very elevated state of consciousness, to be concerned about others, to show a concern that someone will be benefited greatly for their goal in life. So we have some different examples, and I wanted to point some of those out tonight and meditate a little bit on this type of a mood. Now, if we turn first to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, Lord Chaitanya, of course, we know he made his appearance in Navadvip, which, as we learned from last week, even during the time of Jayadev Goswami 300 years earlier, was a seat of education, a seat of scholarly success, a well-known place. So Lord Chaitanya made his appearance there, and then in appearing there, he began the process of developing his following. And after his youth, of course, the youth is some very, very sweet pastimes. But after that, Lord Chaitanya developed his own school, and he developed a following. He had a number of students. And so in this way, he began to establish his own position. And he began to gain some reputation as a scholar, as a logician. Of course, not all of the Vaishnavas at that time completely appreciated this. He would sometimes tease with them that in due course of time, you will see I will be the best devotee. And they would think this was such a bold statement for young Nimai to make. But he was saying like that. So the idea is that in due course of time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after coming in contact, first going to Gaya and performing the Shraddha ceremony, the departure ceremony for his father. And then from there, returning, he had a completely different mood. And then, of course, meeting his spiritual master, Ishwar Puri. This completely ignited in his soul the mood of Prem Bhakti, the mood of developing and sharing Krishna consciousness, particularly through the process of chanting the holy name. This is, we also mentioned last week in his conversations with Prakasananda Saraswati, he pointed out that the instructions that he received, that Lord Chaitanya received from his spiritual master, were that you're a fool. You can't study Vedanta. What you need to do instead is just focus on the holy name of the Lord. Now, of course, in this way, Lord Chaitanya began to develop this different mood of service to Krishna. One of the things that he did when he returned with his students was he constructed a presentation of the alphabet so that every word, every letter in the alphabet actually had a meaning of Krishna. And then he began to appreciate that connection of Krishna and the gopis. So at one point, of course, we know that the glorification of Krishna's greatest devotees, the gopis, is a very wonderful state. So he began to glorify the gopis in this way, began to chant Gopi, 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 chanting the names of the gopis. And in this way, the students that he had taught grammatic teachings and logic and all of these academic processes became very, very much upset. They were not satisfied to hear him behave in this manner. They felt it was inappropriate. And they began to chastise him. They began to criticize him. Now, Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, had come to deliver those who had not developed the seed of bhakti in their heart. This was his compassion for them, his expression of paradukha-dukhi, of being concerned for the most fallen, how he could deliver them. And yet he realized that if they criticized him, if they found fault with him, then how would they become advanced? This was one of the reasons that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was prompted to take sannyas. Because even at that time in India, everyone respected a sannyasi. A sannyasi was given honor, a sannyasi was given respect of listening to what they had to say. No one would dare chastise or criticize a sannyasi like that. which is kind of interesting because if you take even a casual view of the internet, some of the sites that you will see very openly offer rampant criticism of senior members of our society in a very free way. So, at any rate, this motivated Lord Chaitanya, let me take sannyas. Therefore, they won't make this criticism. There'll be some respect there. Of course, this was partially successful, as we mentioned, with the pastimes of Prakasananda Saraswati. Prakasananda Saraswati was the head of the Mayavadis, and they began to criticize Lord Chaitanya. You've taken sannyas in a manner that you should be studying Vedanta. So Lord Chaitanya showed his incredible mercy to them by tricking Prakasananda Saraswati into devotional service. So first he took those that were critical of him and he took sannyas, so they would again offer respects. And then Prakasananda Saraswati, who found fault with his activities as a sannyasi, he tricked him into service. How did he do that? When he went to meet with Prakasananda Saraswati, he entered their assembly and sat where the shoes are kept. And sitting there, he very humbly didn't make any issue. But the sannyasis, particularly Prakasananda, came and extended their hand. Please, no, this is not the proper place for a person to sit of your position. Come and sit with us in a place of honor. So in this way, devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his incarnation as Lord Chaitanya was begun by Prakasananda Saraswati. So in this manner, we see that Lord Chaitanya made an effort, a successful effort, to deliver all of humanity, even at the cost of his own peaceful execution of his household life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was perfectly satisfied with his relationship with the devotees of Navadvip. He had his responsibilities in his schooling. He had a most dutiful wife and a most dutiful mother, and had responsibility to both of them. But in order for the greater benefit of all of humanity to be delivered, Lord Chaitanya left all of that. He gave all of that up and moved on into a order of life as a sannyas in which he would be more free to encompass a variety of people, instruct them, give them guidance, and thus deliver them through both his spoken word and through his travels and through their service to him. So this was a very, very wonderful example of Lord Chaitanya is showing us how this mood of paradukkha is expressed in one's behavior. Now, there was also another devotee, a devotee of Lord Chaitanya, another wonderful example of this paradukkha, and this was found in the personality of Vasudev Dutt. Now, Vasudev Dutt had three particular qualities that he was known for. The first was that he was an expert singer. We'll go into these in a little bit. The second was that he was very generous with his income. And the third was his mood of compassion. So, as far as a singer, during the Lord's pastimes in Vrindavan, his Krishna Lila pastimes, there were two wonderful singers amongst the gopis, Madhukanta and Madhuvrata. Madhukanta and Madhuvrata. And Madhukanta and Madhuvrata appeared in Chaitanya Lila as Mukunda and Vasudev Dutt. And Mukunda and Vasudev Dutt were both very, very wonderful singers. Very melodious tunes, very expert at the right type of tune for the right circumstances. And Gaura-Gaudadesh Dipika describes that they were very, very expert in this art. So they were born in the Chittagong district of what's now Bangladesh. Of course, many of the pastimes of the Lord's associates took place in this part of Bengal that we now call Bangladesh. And unfortunately, because of the present government being predominantly Muslim and the present religious system being predominantly Muslim, many of these religious places have been lost, to the point that where we no longer have access to these places. The home of Narottam Das Thakur, for instance, is. 'Is 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 ' And anyway, they were about 20 miles from the place which was the birth village of Pundarik Vidhinidhi. So nice area there. In the book Prem Vilas, it explains that Vasudeva was the older of the two brothers, Mukunda and Vasudeva, that he was the older. And they lived in a very respectable family of physicians, doctors. We find many of our prominent members from our Indian following, from the Indian society, here in the West at least, are doctors. This was a very common profession in Lord Chaitanya's time. So this is where the last name Dutt came in. Mukunda Dutt and Vasudeva Dutt. This was the familial last name that indicated they were from the physician caste. And lived there in Navadvip. After some time, they relocated to the area of Navadvip. And in this way, they began to become involved in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya's activities. Vasudeva Dutt not only was known for his beautiful voice, but he was one of the chief associates of Mahaprabhu during the Sankirtan activities at Srivasa's home. This was, of course, before the Lord took sannyas. And once the Lord had revealed his divinity to his innermost circle, and at the same time, he was holding these kirtans, and they were just amazing kirtans. It explains that Mahaprabhu enjoyed very much the association of Vasudeva Dutt because he was a perfect example of Vaishnava qualities. We've all had this experience, some devotee that we really like to associate with because they have such wonderful qualities, such nice mood of devotion. So it says, the Chaitanya Charitamrita gives a little explanation. It says that if someone has thousands of tongues, they would not be able to sufficiently glorify the wonderful qualities of Vasudeva Dutt. Now, one of the things about Vasudeva Dutt, now he was very, very close friends with Srivas Pandit and Shivananda Sain. And of course, Shivananda Sain and Srivas Pandit were a bit older, so I'm going to draw an assumption from here because it doesn't give the exact year, but I would say that he must have been older if these were two of his closest friends. Not necessarily, but it would seem that that is indicated here. So in this way, he was very, very intimately involved with them. And another indication of that is how Mahaprabhu indicates in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Adi Leela, there's indication there that Mukunda, his younger brother, Vasudeva, as we mentioned, was older, that Mukunda was Lord Chaitanya's associate since he was a young child. But even though he had that kind of intimate association with Mukunda, he actually says he achieved much more pleasure in associating with Vasudeva. Vasudeva was older. So, at any rate, one of the interesting things about Vasudeva, and this goes to his second quality, was he was incredibly generous. He lived where there were, of course, many devotees who were not as well off as he was, and he was very prone towards facilitating the needs of the devotees and other members of the community that he lived in, and giving in charity for this particular person and assisting that one in their family needs and helping to pay the debts of this one or that one, and in this way he was he was very well known for this charitable side. But the thing is that he never considered his own needs. Sometimes this might happen, that someone is charitable beyond their means of taking care of themselves. And so he was very liberally disposed towards others, to the point that where Mahaprabhu observed that he's, how shall we say, bankrupting himself. So in this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu turned to Shivananda Sain and asked him, because Shivananda Sain, of course, was very well known for managing money. As I've mentioned many times, Shivananda Sain organized the pilgrimage annually from Navadvip, from the whole Bengal area, all the way to Jagannath Puri, as well as the expenses and as well as the accommodations and the prasadam arrangements and the tolls and taxes. All this was arranged by him. So, a very good businessman. And so, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him to please take charge of the finances of Vasudev Dutt so that he didn't get himself into this type of difficulty. Now, it's very interesting to note that Mahaprabhu had some concern in this regard. Sometimes we think that as a devotee, we just do anything, it doesn't matter, Krishna will provide. And while that is true in the ultimate sense, we're nonetheless given intelligence, and we have to use that intelligence properly. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to look out for his dear devotee and arrange for him to be able to be taken care of nicely. So he put Shivananda Sain in charge of his finances. Now, the third quality that we want to speak about regarding Vasudev Dutt is his immense compassion. This compassion, of course, is what drove him to be so liberal and generous in his concerns and support of different causes and different devotees in their needs. But much more so, it prompted a mood of compassion for all living entities. Vasudeva was he was incredibly distressed by the suffering of the living entities. When he would look about him and see that someone was not Krishna conscious, or when he would see the activities of those that were engaged in pursuit of sense gratification, it caused him great suffering, because he understood, being a devotee and being a religious man, he understood that these personalities are simply paving their path to hell, that they will have to take the reciprocation for their sense gratification, and as a result of this they will have to suffer some karmic reaction. The majority of this karmic reaction will cause them to experience a hellish life. Sense gratification generally means not giving any concern towards religious principles. So he prayed to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for the following boon, and this is quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He said, "My dear Lord, you have appeared in this world, so please, I request you accept my prayer. You have come here to save all living entities. You are omnipotent and all-merciful. So if you agree to fulfill my request, it can be easily done that all living entities will be saved. When I see the suffering of the living entities in this world, my heart is torn to pieces." Now, this is an amazing mood. Many of us may see some situation, some horrific accident or some horrible situation where people are suffering. We feel so badly, a plane wreck or a car accident or something like that. We feel, oh, this is so horrible if someone loses their home due to a fire. But here we see that Vasudeva Dutt actually was feeling as if his own heart were being torn about by the suffering of the living entities in Kali Yuga. So he continues, "So I ask you, my dear Lord, please give all of their sins to me. I will take the sins of all the living entities in this world, and I will suffer in hell on behalf of them. But you please deliver them from this material disease that they are suffering in." So this is a very, very magnanimous and broad statement made by such a devotee of the Lord, that his desire is to see that the living entities will not suffer. And it's interesting also, he continues to say, he desired that the sins of every single living entity should be placed on my head so that they will all be liberated. Now, the mood of concern and compassion we can easily appreciate as we extend it to our family. If we see a family member, mother, father, brother, sister, daughter in a suffering condition, we feel such torment. And then some persons, they're able to extend that broader into their immediate community. And they become very much concerned if someone in the community is suffering. Then you have persons that are very much concerned about all of humanity. Some great personalities have had that concern. People like Mother Teresa, or people like St. Francis of Assisi, concern for all of humanity. Here we see Vasudeva Dutt takes it even further than that, every living entity. Now, in the Vaishnava Siddhanta, we understand that there are living entities everywhere, 8,400,000 different species, inhabited by unlimited spirit souls. Even within a room, we may be sitting in the room by ourselves, but it's by no means that there are no living entities in the room but us. As a matter of fact, just a moment or two ago, I looked across the room and I saw 2 ants crossing the floor. All right, now there's 3 living entities in the room. And there's probably some flies and mosquitoes and spiders and so on and so on and so on. All these different living entities. So Vasudeva Dutt was concerned for the suffering of all living entities. And he desired, now, how does one end up in one of these lower species? By committing sinful activity. And by that sinful activity, one loses his opportunity in the human species and has to take lower births. And in those lower births, according to the degree of his sin, he has to work that off. So this was also of a concern to Vasudeva Dutt. He did not want living entities in that way to suffer, regardless of their physical body. So any living entity, he wanted to take their suffering so that any hellish condition they had would be placed on him, and that living entity would be liberated and returned back to the spiritual world. He continues, he says, you have desired liberation. No, I'm sorry, Mahaprabhu says to Vasudeva Dutt, says, you have desired the liberation of all living entities in the universe. Therefore, so be it. Now, this is a little bit shocking. Mahaprabhu agrees. Yes, let everyone be liberated. You said you want to take all their sins so they can be liberated. Great, let them all be liberated. So one might think, how is it that Mahaprabhu is agreeable that Vasudeva Dutt should suffer in this way? Then Mahaprabhu continues, they will be saved without your having to suffer any of the consequences of their sins. Krishna is not incapable of doing it. He has all powers. So why should he make you suffer for their sins? Those whose welfare you desire will become Vaishnavas, and Krishna will remove the sins of those who are Vaishnavas. Now, this is an interesting point. The sins of those who are Vaishnavas. Sometimes we find in the process of devotional service, Rupa Goswami explains in the Upadeshamrita, that there is the presence of mixed devotional service. Mixed devotional service means that our devotional service is tinged by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Tinged by some activities which may not be of the highest standard. Sometimes a devotee, due to foolishness or ignorance, may steal something, or may engage in some activity which is less than stellar. So such activities may well carry a reaction to them. We all in each of our communities have seen an example, I'm sure, of some devotee that does something foolish that gets them into quite a predicament, to which is a very unfortunate activity, sinful activity. So here, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, due to your desire, all living entities who are Vaishnavas and have sins will be forgiven, as well as all those who are not Vaishnavas, let them become Vaishnavas. Because one cannot go back to Godhead unless one is a Vaishnava. What is the meaning of Vaishnava? One who is a worshipper of Vishnu, one who is a worshipper of the personality of Godhead. So in this way, it's a very, very wonderful agreement that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives to Vasudeva Dutt. You're expressing the highest standard of Paradukkha Dukkha. You want to liberate every living entity in the universe and take their sins on your own head. I agree with your proposal. Let every living entity in the universe be liberated. But you do not have to take their sins. Krishna can eliminate all those sins and make everyone a devotee. So in this way, Vasudeva Dutt was requesting the Lord to assist him in this way. This is an example to the world of Vasudeva Dutt's great love for all living entities. Sometimes we have the opportunity to preach and present devotional topics to those that may not be following the vegetarian lifestyle. And there are different methods of doing that, either based upon Shastra or based upon logic, and sometimes based upon theoretical truths. So there are different means that may be used. I've had the opportunity in the last week of someone I've been discussing some topics of why they should give up eating meat, and presenting some topics and some information to them, not strictly from the Shastra, from the scriptural background, but from the practical, logical background as to the suffering caused to these animals. And this had an impact on them. They were able to understand that. So this is one of the ways that we can be concerned about the well-being of others, because if there is some reaction for causing pain to other living entities, we don't want to see anybody suffer from that. So in this way, Vasudev Dutt didn't want anyone to suffer, and by the blessings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this was actually given to him, this blessing. So very, very wonderful here. Another example we have here, this was something else. Here again I mentioned that my wife was reading this to me during the week, and this is about Janak Maharaj. Now, some of you may be familiar, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the 12 Mahajans. These are the 12 great personalities who have established the standards, the principles, the qualities, activities of which we should pursue in the perfection of our devotional service. These 12 Mahajans are personalities throughout all time that have been empowered by the personality of Godhead through his different incarnations to give great examples to us. So one of these personalities, Janaka Maharaj, is the father of Sita. He's a great devotee of Lord Ramchandra. Of course, his daughter is married to Ramchandra and is the wife. So in this way, it explains that he executed his life very wonderfully, and when the time came for him to depart from this world, very, very wonderful arrangement was made for his stepping onto a wonderful swan boat. Actually, every day during his life, it mentions that he executed the different activities of yoga and meditation and religious principles and giving and charity, in such a way that his body was perfected. And so when time came, he descended a beautiful airplane decorated with bells and garlands, and this was to take him back to the spiritual abode. So as Janak Maharaj mounted this plane, it then began its journey. Now, on the way, the plane went near the abode of Yamaraj. There are, of course, when one goes to visit a friend's house or go somewhere, there are many different paths and drives you can go. So in this way, somehow or another, this wonderful celestial airplane, on its path back to the spiritual kingdom, passed by the abode of Yamaraj. Now, it's very, very interesting, because in the abode of Yamaraj, there's great suffering. The living entities there are in the hellish condition of life. They're being oppressed for all the sinful activities they've performed. They're suffering greatly for these activities. And they actually, when they saw that the celestial airplane came by with Janaka Maharaj in it, they desired to have his company. Now, this is interesting, because it means that somehow or another they were able to appreciate the presence of a devotee. So they requested him. They spoke very piteously, it describes, that they requested him, "Oh, dear Blessed One, please do not leave. We have been greatly tortured by all of our sinful activities, and we are now feeling very, very happy due to contact with the mere breezes that are coming from your body. This is an amazing thing, that simply by the breezes from the body of this highly advanced devotee, they were feeling some relief. I'm sure we've all had that experience on a very, very hot day. Sometimes the rain will come, and then just after the rain, there'll be some light breezes come. And if you're in the house, you open the house up and the breezes come through, and it carries fresh air and the cool temperature that the rains have brought in. It's so refreshing. Very, very, very satisfying. So in the same way, the breezes that were coming along from the body of Janak Maharaj was giving great pleasure and satisfaction to these personalities. So, hearing these words, of course, Janak Maharaj is a king, and by his very responsibilities as a king, he had to look after the well-being of those that were not being cared for properly. That it was his duty to see to how to relieve their suffering, how to look after their needs, how to see that they were properly engaged. This is one of the wonderful qualities of a Vedic king, is there would be no hunger, there would be no one without proper type of work, there would be no one homeless. These activities were all the responsibility of the king to see that they were diminished from the kingdom. So when he heard these words from these suffering persons in the abode of Yamaraj, he thought to himself, if, due to the touch of the breezes that have come from my body, I'm able to bring happiness to these residents, then let me stay here. This will become my heaven. So, such a great pious king, that instead of taking the opportunity to return to heaven, he thought, if staying here will bring some relief to these persons who are suffering, then in that way I will stay here and I will consider this to be heaven. So, thinking like this, he established himself on this celestial airplane right at the gateway to hell. Right at the doorway to hell, he established himself. I want us to try and just picture this in our mind. The idea that someone is there at the beginning of the entrance to this most suffering condition and very satisfied and happy to be there. So, in this way he stayed there for some time, and Yamaraj eventually came to hear about this. So he came out to the entrance to the hellish region, and he saw that Janak Maharaj is there. So he was there by the door, and he went to speak with him. He said, "O king," he said, "you are the crest jewel of all piety." He said, "You have come here and are residing here for where these wicked, sinful persons are staying. What is your purpose here?" He said, so Janak Maharaj explained to him that I understand that somehow or another, by the breezes coming from my body, this is relieving the suffering of these personalities, and I don't want to see them suffer. Therefore, I've taken this opportunity to stay here. Yamaraj says, "Oh, no, my dear king," he said, "you don't understand. Do you know that this is the place for the most wicked sinners who have caused suffering for others?" He said, "This is not a place for persons of pious background, persons like yourself. This is a place for those who deceive others, for those who criticize others, for those who steal another's wealth. Over here, this place, this is a man who has abandoned a religious wife who was serving him without any fault. And over here, this is a person who, out of greed for wealth, deceived a friend and took all of his money. They've come here for me to punish. These are the persons who do not remember the pastimes of Lord Ramchandra with their mind, with their words, or with their deeds. They are thrown into hell as a result of their sinful activities." "Oh, very intelligent king," he said. "My servants are unable to even look at a person such as you." Now, you'll remember this from the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, when Ajamil overheard the conversation between the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas. And then the Yamadutas went back to Yamaraj. Yamaraj instructed the Yamadutas. He said, you are not even allowed to look upon the form of a person who is wearing the Tulsi beads or has the Vaishnava tilak on. You may not even look at them. So Yamaraj is saying the same thing here. He said, my servants are not even allowed to look at a person like you. So, hearing these words from Yamaraj, Janaka replied, he said, O Lord, out of pity for the well-being of these persons, I shall not go to Vaikuntha. I shall keep myself here. Although situated in this place, I may feel some slight discomfort, but by my being here, somehow these persons are feeling some relief from their discomfort. Therefore, I will be happy to stay here and not proceed to Vaikuntha. So hearing the words of Janak, Yamaraj began to speak again. He said, no, my dear king, please, you didn't understand. Let me explain to you. This one, let me just give you some background about these persons. This one here, he had sex with a friend's wife that had confided in him for shelter. Therefore, he's being roasted on a stake. And then after that, he will be born as a pig. And this person here, he has raped the wife of another man. And therefore, he will go to the hell known as Rorava, where he will be roasted for thousands of years. And this wicked person over here, he stole the wealth of others and enjoyed it for himself. Therefore, he will have his hands cut off. All these really, really heavy punishments are being spoken of by Yamaraj. And then he will be boiled in an ocean of blood and pus. We can't even imagine some of the hellish conditions that are there. And then there's another type. This is one we have to be very careful about. This is described in the 5th canto. He says, this person here did not honor, even with kind words, what to speak of water and sweets, a guest that came to his home. He refused to give him any attention. So, in this way, Yamaraj goes on to describe for some period of time a variety of different types of sinful persons and what their activities had been and how they had committed these sinful activities. So then he says these persons had never worshipped Lord Vishnu. They have never listened to the transcendental accounts of the activities of the personality of Godhead. How can they be freed from hell? O great king, if you desire to release them, even though they are great sinners, then give them the following religious process. Instruct them by getting up in the morning, by meditating on a pure heart on Lord Ramchandra, who is known as the remover of great sins. Give them this religious merit which you obtained each morning with a pure heart by uttering Ram, Ram, Ram. And obtaining that merit, then they will all be freed from hell. So in the same way, it was instructed that you give up that pious result that you obtained by engaging in the service of Lord Ramchandra. So as Janak Maharaj heard this, he said, let these persons be released from hell due to the religious merit I have earned in my service to Lord Ramchandra. And as soon as he said that, all these persons that were dwelling in these hellish conditions we just described were freed and attained divine spiritual bodies. They all came before Janak Maharaj with their hands folded. And they said to him, O king, by your favor in one moment we have been freed from the most miserable hell. And now we have attained the highest position. So this is one of the wonderful qualities of Janak Maharaj and his showing this mood of paradukaduki, of being greatly appreciative for the suffering of others and wanting to see them delivered. And of course we have this example also in the life of our own Srila Prabhupada, who, residing very peacefully in the village of Vrindavan, in the Radha Damodar temple, very nicely engaged in thinking upon the divine couple and in service to Vrindavan Dham itself, simply to fulfill the desire of his spiritual master, and simply to deliver the fallen, suffering, conditioned souls of this Western world. He left all of that and came here to America, suffering a difficult boat ride, suffering through 2 heart attacks on the boat ride, living in New York City in the middle of the winter, having never experienced winter or snow before, and living in conditions with young followers that had no idea how to properly respect or treat an elderly sannyasi. So many difficult situations, and then traveling throughout the globe so many times under so much austere conditions, simply to establish the principles of Krishna consciousness for the benefit of all of us. So that here, in the year 2009, we can sit very happily and peacefully in this Krishna.com studios, and all of you can sit at home very nicely, like Manu and Wendy and Manjesh and Sharne and Urvasi and Karuna Shakti, and listen to these wonderful pastimes of these great devotees. This is the benefit for what we owe Srila Prabhupada, for his sharing his Mudapar Dukaduki. So, I wanted to take these last few minutes. Those of you that may be familiar with my homepage or face page on Facebook, I noted today that there would be something very exciting, some very exciting news revealed here tonight. And I wanted to speak a little bit about that. There has been a recent event in the history of our Vaishnavacharyas that has just been so wonderful. I had to share it with all of you. It involves one great devotee of Mahaprabhu's known as Madhu Pandit. Madhu Pandit was one of the early Goswamis of Vrindavan, along with Rupa, Sanatan, Jiva, Gopal Bhatta, Bhatta Raghunath, and Das Raghunath. They were all there together, executing the service to Vrindavan Dham. Madhu Pandit, unfortunately, we find very little biographical information. We do not know very much about his family background. There's no mention of him made in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There is a bit of mention of him in the Bhakti Ratnakar. It describes how when Jiva Goswami took Srinivasacharya around to the different places when Srinivas came to Vrindavan, that he introduced him at that time to Madhu Pandit, and was able to present the two to each other. Bhakti Ratnakar gives the following in the words of Jiva Goswami: "O Srinivas, what more can I say? The Lord reveals himself to his pure devotee, who then preaches his glories to the world. Who can describe the incomprehensible activities by which the Lord becomes subservient to the love of his devotee? Thus did Sri Krishna reveal himself to Sri Madhu Pandit, who is the wonderful abode of all good qualities." So, a little bit of background to build up to what I'd like to speak about here is Brajanab, who was the grandson of Krishna. He established for different deities to be carved and installed throughout Brajadam. And it mentions that he had 3 particular deities carved of Krishna. Now, he never saw Krishna directly. So these descriptions of how the deities should be carved were given to him by Uttara, who was, of course, present during Krishna's pastimes. So, as the mother of Maharaj Pariksit, she had this immediate access, and so she described. So 3 deities were carved. The first was Govindaji, and it's said that Govindaji resembled the face of Sri Krishna. And next was Madan Mohan, who it is said resembled Krishna from the neck down to the navel. No, excuse me, I'm sorry. From the Madan Mohan resembled from the navel to the feet, and that Gopinath resembled Krishna from the navel up to the neck. So in this way, Madan Mohan, Govindaji, and Gopinath were the 3 deities that represented the full form of Sri Krishna. So these were carved by Brajanath, and then they were installed in Vrindavan. Now, in the temple of Gopinath in Vrindavan, where he is installed, there is a wonderful deity there of to his side of Srimati Radharani, and to the other side of Radharani's sister, Ananga Manjari. And there's a very interesting story connected with this. When Janavamata came to Vrindavan to have the darshan of the deities there, she came before the deity of Gopinath. And most amazing thing, it mentions that the deity of Gopinath jumped off the altar and took Janavamata by the arm and pulled her onto the altar with him and then closed the curtain. And at that time, when they opened the curtain, the pujaris there, Janavamata was gone and Gopinath was standing back on the altar. So they could understand that Janavamata, of course, according to Gaura Gonadesha Dipika, she is Ananga Manjari. So they arranged that the deity of Ananga Manjari was placed there on the altar next to Lalita, next to Gopinath. At any rate, so this is how the deity of Ananga Manjari came to be there. So when Srinivas and his companions, Narottam and Shyamananda, were preparing to leave Vrindavan to take the books of the Goswamis and take them to Bengal and distribute them throughout the different regions, it mentions that Madhu Pandit came forward with a flower garland from Gopinath and gave it to these devotees as a blessing. So it's described in one of the Puranas that if one can make the darshan in one day before the sun sets of all three deities, Govindaji, Gopinath, and Madan Mohan, that one will attain perfection. Now, currently, Govindaji and Gopinath are residing in Jaipur, and Madan Mohan is residing in Karoli, which is just near this. So if one's a very careful traveler, one can get the darshan of all three of these deities in one day and attain perfection. Now, how did these deities come to be in Jaipur? Well, it mentions that in the 1600s, during the invasions by the Muslims, that the Emperor Aurangzeb, he had made threats and advances to destroy the temples and deities of Vrindavan. So the deities were all put on a bullock cart from Vrindavan and secretly taken to Radhakund. And then in Radhakund, they were kept for some time. Some of the deities it mentions were actually submerged in the waters of Radhakund in order to facilitate their being kept safe. So then after some time, copies of these deities were all carved there at Radhakund. And then the original deities were sent to Jaipur, where there was a proper Vaishnava king who would protect the deities in this way. Now, these replica deities, because they were carved exactly, were considered to be non-different, but to be expansions from the original deity. The Pratibhu, it's called. And it's considered that they are non-different than the original deities. So this is how you see the deities there in Vrindavan of these different forms of the Lord. So, in due course of time, the safety of the deities was protected, and they were sent to Jaipur. Now, when Gopinath was sent to Jaipur, there was a very interesting couple of items that were sent with the Gopinath deity, because Gopinath was being looked after by Madan Mohan. Actually, the Gopinath deity revealed himself to Paramananda Bhattacharya at Bamsibat in Vrindavan, and then he turned the deity. He and Madhu Pandit were both disciples of Gadadhar Pandit, and he turned the deity over to Madhu Pandit to take care of. And Madhu Pandit cared for the deity of Gopinath for a very, very long time, arranged for building of the big temple and all these different services. So when the deity of Gopinath went, along with the deity was sent a long tulsi coat that was worn by Madhu Pandit. This is a coat of tulsi beads sewn together, worn as a jacket, and Madhu Pandit's japa beads. And these were sent to Jaipur with the deity. Now, those of you that have had the good fortune to go to the Gopinath temple in Jaipur have seen these on display. They're there to this day. When you enter into the courtyard before entering the temple itself, there is a wonderful courtyard with a glass case, and in this glass case you can get the darshan of Madhu Pandit's Tulsi coat. I believe also he had a Tulsi hat, and then his Japamala is there. Now this has been there for some 400 years, 1604, yeah, some 450 years. Unfortunately, the standards of care are not exactly what we might find in some of the museums here in the West. This is just a simple glass box set into the wall, no treatment of the air or air conditioning or anything of that nature, and it happens to be right in the path of the sun. And as a result of the course of 400 years, the jacket has become very much in a decaying position. So visiting there many times with different devotees have spoken about how wonderful it would be to be able to take care of this and maybe get the jacket and put it in a proper condition and all like that. So to this means, just a couple of weeks ago, His Holiness Indradumna Swami was visiting Jaipur with some devotees. And in visiting Jaipur, it was not the festival season, neither did he have, a parikram group with hundreds and hundreds of disciples. So it was a very nice, simple, quiet mood there in the Gopinath temple. And he asked one of his disciples that speaks Hindi to please approach the priest and see if they could get closer darshan of the Tulsi jacket. So the priest came after hearing about Indradumna Swami's interest in his activities and his preaching and all, and he was very happy to let Maharaj and his devotees have closer darshan. So he opened the door and he allowed for Indradumna Swami and the others to touch the jacket and to actually see the contents that were inside there. And the most amazing thing is that this glass door to this case had not been opened in over 60 years. So the Goswami was very, very happy to, let the devotees have this darshan. And they spoke with him about how there should be some proper care for it, and some humidifier to remove the moisture from the air, and maybe brought out of the sunlight and all like this. So they discussed these things with him, and then the devotees finished their darshan with Gopinath, and then they left and returned to Vrindavan. About a week or so later, this devotee, this disciple of Indradumna Maharaj, came to him and told him he had just received a phone call from the Goswami at the Gopinath temple, and he wanted Maharaj and this devotee Narottam Das Thakur Das to return, that he was prepared to give the coat of Madhu Pandit to them to care for. So of course this is great excitement. One of the actual few real possessions of the Goswamis of Vrindavan. So as Maharaj was driving to Jaipur, he told me that he thought to himself, this is not necessary to take this from here. This coat is connected with the Gopinath deity and has been for some hundreds of years. So when he arrived there and spoke with the Goswami, he encouraged him, this isn't the right thing to give the coat away. Instead, let's make arrangements for the proper display of the coat. So first of all, they allowed them to take the coat out of the case. Indradumna Swami mentions that he was able to reach into the case and assist in lifting this coat of Madhu Pandit made of Tulsi wood out and lay it down, and they took photographs and measured and everything. And then he encouraged the Goswami inside of the temple, in front of the altar of Gopinath. On one side is a small temple of, I believe it's Ganesh, I'm not positive, and on the other side is an empty space. So he encouraged him, take a portion of these beads and create a pushpa samadhi, and then take some marble and have the pranam mantra for Madhu Pandit posted on the wall. Have some artisans draw a portrait of Madhu Pandit and his finding of the Gopinath deity, and then establish this, bring the coat in here, build a proper display, and with the humidifier and out of the sunlight, and in this way temperature controlled, and in this way preserve it so that all the pilgrims that come to Gopinath will see the importance of Madhu Pandit, because many of them have no idea, oh, it's just some coat over there, some display, don't even know what it is. But by bringing it in and putting it next to the Gopinath deity, then this way it will become very prominent. And Indraduma Swami pledged that he would take the responsibility for the cost involved in establishing this Pushpa Samadhi Mandir for Madhu Pandit. So this is a very, very wonderful, wonderful service. And finally, after some hundreds of years, and particularly after the last 40 years of ISKCON devotees going and seeing the condition of this code and hoping and praying for something better, this will now be successfully accomplished. So one of the few remaining artifacts from the Goswamis, full-size artifact, will now be properly established with the Pushpa Samadhi. Pranam mantra is established there so that devotees will... and then the other thing was a little bit of biographical information about the Gopinath temple and about the life of Madhu Pandit will be printed on a flyer in different languages that can be handed out to the pilgrims as they come. So in this way, Gopinath, desiring that the glories of his devotee Madhu Pandit would become known, this opportunity will now take place. So this was great and exciting news to me when I heard this, and I told Indraduma Swami, I said I would have to share this with all the devotees on the Monday night broadcast on Lives of the Vaishnavacharyas, speaking about Madhu Pandit and then expressing how now the true glory of Madhu Pandit is one of the great Goswamis of Vrindavan and the caretaker and servant of Madhu Pandit's heart and soul, Gopinath deity, will now be established in a very, very wonderful way, and pilgrims can come and properly get the darshan of this Tulsi coat that he wore and understand a little bit about his background. So I wanted to share this information. I think it's a very wonderful opportunity. Anybody out there that has any interest in being more involved in this, maybe helping to support this cause or whatever, you can feel free to contact me through Krishna.com, and I'll put you in touch with the proper people. So that will finish tonight's broadcast. If anybody in the chat room has some questions, I see some things have come up while we've been speaking. And if anybody has any questions, you can post them in the chat room, and I'll be happy to try and answer those. And as we close tonight, I do want to just remind everybody that we are here by the kind graces of the devotees here at Krishna.com. And very, very wonderfully, they provide 5 nights of the week for all of us to have an opportunity for these live broadcasts. You can go to the home page and on the search engine type in live, and it'll give you the full listing of all the different programs each night of the week. And these programs do cost money, so if any of you would like to support the activities of these types of broadcasts, you can go to donations at Krishna.com and assist with the activities of Krishna.com and their wonderful work in spreading the Lives of the Vaishnavacharyas, the Japa workshops, the forgiveness seminars, teachings of a spiritual warrior with Mother Indrani, like that. So one of the questions we have here is, do we have any pictures of Madhu Pandit's coat? Not yet, but they're coming. I've been promised that they will be sent, and as soon as they're sent, I will see that they're posted, both on, I'm sure they'll be on Facebook, and then I'll try to arrange something with Krishna.com that we can post them, or I can bring copies. We'll show them soon. So as soon as that information is there, it'll be made available to everybody. These new programs, Mother Karuna Shakti is asking about the different programs. Krishna.com has actually had these programs running almost as long as I've been on the broadcast network here, for over a year, the different programs, and they're all noted on the directory that you can find at the homepage for Krishna.com. Now, one thing I would like to mention is that next week I will not be here for the broadcast. I'm going to be performing a wedding for 2 very dear devotee friends of mine. They're getting married. And so next Monday evening, we may show a, what is that they say? One of our favorite reruns. We may show something there. We'll have that part worked out. Abhay Prabhu, our tech supervisor, will see what's going to work in that regard. So I won't be with you live next Monday, but we will return the following Monday. And hope that you all will be able to join us there. And I see Mother Karuna Shakti is asking about last week's show. Well, Karuna Shakti, Abhay has just joined you in the chat room, and he is the person that is responsible for posting all these. So Bai says that they will rerun a show next week, and maybe they'll be able to run last week's show. You can talk with him there in the chat room. I'm not sure how that program will go, but there are some shows that we have not had the opportunity to transfer onto the link on the home page yet, because here again it does take some time, effort, energy, and facilities, and we're working through them as best we can. Any donations to help that cause, Christian.com will appreciate. You should know that those like myself and Mother Indrani, Mahatma, Ramia, the devotees that do these programs, this is our service to the Vaishnava community. None of the donations you give go to pay us anything. The donations all go to take care of the technical needs and the responsibilities of the, posting all this on the net and all that type of tech stuff that I have really no idea about, but know that it's really important to be able to make this all happen. I see Sharnay108, who's been a very long time regularly with us, is in a similar situation I was over the summer. He's got work responsibilities that he's not going to be able to join us for the extended period of time. Sharnay, while you're working, just remember Krishna. That's all we can encourage. And then maybe sometime down the road you'll be able to adjust that situation. That part of my summer sabbatical was based on that the new job I had, I didn't have the Monday nights off, but after some time, a little bit of seniority, I was able to arrange to have Monday nights off to continue on with this broadcast. So, Sharnay, I hope the same thing happens with you, and that before too long you'll be back with us here at Christian.com for our Monday night programs. And with that, we'll close once again in this episode of Lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, and we'll see you live in 2 weeks.